Anna Lilia Mirpour's 2014 film A Girl Walks Home at Night holds a unique place in contemporary cinema. Though the director's influences were worn openly on her sleeve through the making of the film, Amirpour has managed to craft a piece of cinema which is both highly unique and eerily familiar. This context is established very purposefully by the tagline of the film, which aptly describes it as the first Iranian vampire western. The selected extract of this film shows quite a lot of this influence, while also standing out as one of the most significant sequences within the film.
A film's form often encompasses the use of patterns for engagement of our senses, feelings, and minds within a process. Through this process, we find our interest sharpened, with focused attention and an urge to progress forward through the movie. Following within the footsteps of Robert Town, the screenwriter for Chinatown, the movie opens in a soft manner, under the ideology of fast movie entrances consequently proving to be negative. Albeit soft, Amirpour utilizes subtle graphic imagery such as the pile of bodies, alongside eerie themed music placements to incarnate patterns in our minds early on and shape our experience for the coming scenes. Screen time is promised to Arash to give us a familiarity with the character down the line and place further strain on the suspense that will follow. Drug use is on display early, indicating the dark nature of the picture and providing expectations for what the viewer is to witness throughout the remainder of the movie. Conflicts build and visual keys are established which will be revisited within the extract. Amirpour and the screenwriters give us a taste of the suspense and physicality that would be expected to appear later, given the use of form in which the imagery of the girl biting Saeed's finger up is a throwback to a scene earlier in the movie, which might suggest a different expectation of what we're about to see, given the brain's adoption of pattern notification. This scene highlights a potential for further graphic violence as the filmmaker's creative decisions have shaped our expectations, teasing us with the promise of thrills but making us wait and develop further emotion behind the characters we are presented with, furthering the suspense. Primed by this opening, we will be vigilant for anything that would put the characters at risk, and of course the violence of the first scene gives the lie to the fates of the characters ahead.
It is no doubt that A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night portrays countless properties of mise-en-scène throughout the entire film. However, when specifically focusing on the short 10-minute extract, it dramatically uncovers a wide range of theatrical mise-en-scène components in such a short amount of time, which has been achieved through the intelligent direction of Amirpour's works. Mise-en-scène is simply understood as being the elements placed in front of the camera to create setting. The prominent components of setting, lighting, and costume are some of which that have assisted in reaching the horrific, gory, and bloody vampire scene to be so realistic to its viewers. The costume and makeup are components of mise-en-scène that connect the narrative and scene together in order to visually enhance the experience for the audience. In the extract, the use of makeup acts as a symbol in the narrative, as well as just being used for general costume and makeup purposes. At the beginning of the scene, the girl, who is played by Sheila Vand, is fairly natural with her makeup, acting as though she is just a normal girl. However, when turning into her vampire self, her whole natural face makeup changes into a deep dramatic look, ultimately identifying the switch in persona. As depicted throughout the scene, the girl changing into an intense makeup look on camera enables the audience to understand a climax is approaching as she is turning into a vampire, building up the suspense. After the gory murder, it is obvious that the use of special effects makeup has created a bloody-like shadow around her mouth, solidifying the bloody horror aspect to be realistic. When comparing the makeup at the beginning of the scene to the end, it really identifies how much a simple aspect like makeup can identify so much about the narrative in itself. Similar to makeup, costume has been used in the extract in order to provide the audience with a better understanding of what the characters' personas are. Early on in the scene, the girl is shown to be a somewhat normal lady, dressed in everyday clothes such as a t-shirt and jeans. However, when the change in makeup appears, she also changes into a black gown, covering her head down to her feet, only showing her face. Although it is said in Iran and women are subject to wearing burqas, the girl's gown is spookily different, which is established when she slyly walks down the street, creepily approaching Saeed. Saeed has tattoos all over his neck and face, gold chains around his neck, and wears an expensive-looking tracksuit with a beak portraying the stereotypical drug dealer look. This stereotype is then confirmed when they arrived at the house, which is a drug-infested and full of dirty cash. Throughout the scene, lighting is another prominent factor that assists in creating the overall mise-en-scène in the extract. Although the film is entirely black and white, it is evident that in this extract the use of artificial lighting has worked in order to achieve the eerie feel. Low-key lighting has been implemented, which is obvious as there is no stark or wholly bright areas of light. This type of lighting contributes to the suspicious and threatening aspects through the stronger contrasts and darker shadows. In each indoor scene, it is primarily top lighting coming from the ceiling lights, creating dark shadows on their faces in order to build up suspense. Overall, the quality of the lighting in the extract is hard lighting, as it is depicted as strong, crisp, and sharp shadows, contributing to the narrative. Setting is Zen, as it is the place that uncovers where the narrative is told. Throughout the extract, we come across three main settings: the girl's house, the street, and Saeed's house. Firstly, the girl's house is a loft-like small house which projects authenticity in constructed settings through the placement of her hanging posters. Despite her true dark character being uncovered later on in the extract, the initial setting provides the audience with a view on her being a normal individual. In order to replicate her being somewhat normal, the posters and abstract wallpapers assist in creating the idea that she is no different to any other girl of her age, nor is she suspicious, which is the goal, as it makes the climax more unexpected, thus more horrifying. The second setting in the extract is the street, which has only the girl and Saeed in it, creating a ghost town feel. Having such an empty street with suspicious-looking man begins to build up the suspense for the audience that something is approaching. Lastly, Saeed's house is a setting that also provides authenticity, as well as the interplay of setting and characters. The use of props, such as the drugs, hanging animal heads, money, and weapons, solidify the notion that this Saeed is extremely dangerous. Overall, both Saeed and the girl's house each identify their persona, and complemented by the ghost street, it intelligently creates an unexpected shock murder for the audience.
It's not at all uncommon for contemporary films to appropriate aspects of multiple genres to create something new. However, what is more uncommon is for a film to bring together so many seemingly entirely disparate influences together into a focused whole. In equal parts vampire horror, spaghetti western, romance, and dramatic tragedy, the influence of Girl are so broad that the end result is a film that almost exists to a genre all of its own. In the case of the specific sequence in question though, it's mostly the horror elements that are on display, though there are multiple notable deviations from this formula here. The sequence opens on a fairly bizarre note, providing the audience a window into the lonely existence of the girl, and in doing so allowing her a level of vulnerability rarely afforded to the monsters of traditional horror films. Despite this initial deviation, there are some archetypal elements at play as the sequence progresses, namely the silent, foreboding monster and the unwitting victim. The girl has a strange, foreboding, wraith-like presence within this sequence. She moves slowly and methodically and with a sort of shapeless quality, provided by the chador which she wears throughout most of the film. These elements of her movement and appearance play into certain horror tropes of the slow-moving, dark, and obscure monster, though the real deviation here comes in part due to the gender of the monster. Until more recently, the vast majority of horror movie monsters would be imposing male figures, especially when looking at vampire movies such as Dracula, which has clearly had an influence on this film. In the case of this film though, the girl is a fairly small-framed and ordinarily unimposing figure, where her victim is perhaps more in line what you may expect of a villainous horror archetype. While there are quite a few deviations from typical horror films, there are elements at play, particularly looking at the outbreak of violence towards the end of the sequence, that are quintessentially horror. The scene in the drug dealer's house is extremely tense. Much like in other horror movies, the audience is sure that something is going to happen, but is unsure of exactly what it will be or how it will unfold. When the violence does arrive, Just like is common of a great deal of horror movies, it is fast, shocking, and violent. As has been mentioned a number of times already, Girl is a real mixing pot of a film, yet still through the myriad of references shines a singular style which aligns the piece with much of the rest of Amirpour's filmography. Whether it's the characters themselves, their place in the world, or the way they communicate, there is a great deal at play which bears similarities to much of the director's other work. In an interview with Vice, Amirpour stated about her characters that she's attracted to the idea of the rejects and the misfits having their own kind of sonnet. In most of her work, and especially her two features to date, these lonely outcast type characters are often central to the narrative. Also congruous with her other work is a lack of any substantial amount of dialogue, and in its stead a heavy reliance on visual storytelling. Amirpour described her approach to storytelling as going through it in a visceral way, on many planes of feeling things. Sounds, visuals, emotions, all of these things come together in an atmosphere that she likes to create. There is also a certain gritty, almost post-apocalyptic vibe to the visuals that carry over to her other films. Whether it be in the design of the world, the unexplained pit of bodies in the town, or the choice to use lenses with a great deal of distortion, Amirpour seems to make a purposeful choice in both this film and her others to ensure that the world of the film has a certain weight and worn-in character to it. The cinematography and lighting of Girl could be best summarized as expressive and hyper-stylized while still retaining a degree of naturalism. On this overall visual style, cinematographer Lyle Vincent claimed that he likes to push stories like Girl towards heightened naturalism, while still using a practical motivation to sculpt the scenes. This sequence, together with much of the rest of the film, utilizes a sort of noir-infused, low-key but high-contrast lighting philosophy, especially when looking at the scene with the drug dealers apart. Another notable choice for the cinematography is the decision to shoot on anamorphic lenses. These lenses not only give the film its widescreen aspect ratio that is often associated with a cinematic look, but also due to the specific lenses chosen, the image has a great deal of distortion towards the edge of frame, a big factor in why this film looks so unique. Another significant choice in terms of visual style is the decision to shoot in black and white, something which ordinarily in a film would withdraw from the naturalism, but somehow the world of Girl feels as if it were made to be shot in this way. It really is a world of greys. To portray it in colour would in many ways go against the thematic elements at play. On black and white cinematography, famed cinematographer Roger Deakins once stated that it makes the image more about light and composition, where a coloured image may be superficially interesting but not necessarily the point of what the story's about. Therefore, in many ways, the choice to shoot in black and white makes sense under the context of the director's tendency to focus on visual storytelling. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night truly is a mixing pot of a film, with influences ranging from the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone to the vampire novels of Anne Rice. The true marvel of this film is the way in which director Annalilli Amirpour is able to bring all of these influences together into a film which truly seems to carry its own unique identity in such a satisfying manner.